Okay, this lesson for the Global LAMP University, LAMP referring to as an acronym, and we'll talk later about that, but Global LAMP University, GLU, GLU, a Dr. John E. Penn of, he had graduated here at Lyons College in Arkansas, vast, diverse background, multiple degrees. But his approach to the field of religion, for example, was in this particular dimension and field, I should rather say, was a social science approach. He would converse very comfortably because he was intrigued as a pattern continued to emerge. I was intrigued because as a student, a graduate assistant of his, and then a research assistant still, I was fascinated because much of my study in the field of consulting had to do with organizational behavior and the study of those social behaviors and the dynamics involved. So I had found myself early on in life unable to see from a point of view from where a contradiction appeared. And then he had the aptitude to study in such a manner so as to not see or allow for a contradiction. So his aim was to deliberately study with the end in mind that no contradiction would appear. So let's just look at a few things, especially when we talk about religion. We will talk about constructs, categories, formed categories, and just see how much of a pattern we can notice. We're aware of the fact that, for example, in many of the faith traditions, religious orders, there's a clergy laity dichotomy. But we have in our, for example, the common Koine, highly inflected Greek text, for example, we have this word kleros or kleros. So in actuality, we have clergy people. So the dichotomy doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, even the origin of this word is not from the Koine common language. And that would be interesting. We'll look at that later. But you notice that clergy versus laity, or clergy and, or however that plays out. But it's striking that we already begin to have a dichotomy that sets basically, I guess, becomes more or less the relation according to which all dichotomies continue. For example, we had the mono, and when it comes to theistic, the theistic nature of God, we have monotheistic assertions and then polytheistic assertions. And so we'll just call this the theistic category. Well, we know about the Trinity, which is really amazing. I will spend a lot of time on how is it that the Trinity is found among so many established, let's say, established Christian traditions, Christian religious traditions and orders, and that not be more obvious or conspicuous as how it contradicts this either-orism. So much so that, for example, in my faith, and according to the scriptures, the God of the Bible is one being, three persons. Thus, the Father's fully God, the Son's fully God, the Holy Spirit's fully God, yet one God. So the Father, person, Son, person, Holy Spirit, a person, and yet we have one being, God. So when that's questioned, such as through something called modalism or polytheism, many gods, or some who say one God but deny the personhood. But it's really interesting from a social scientist view, especially as in collaborating with Dr. Penn and collaborating with Dr. Eddie Johnson and speaking with Dr. Robert Kelly and other colleagues. What would become of the Trinity should this either-orism have obtained and sustained in some of the traditions? Because our biases are what sustain our preferred solutions. So we have clergy people. Let's just circle let's just do that. Let's just circle what we notice in this. And again, we have the open, closed when it comes to theism. And yet the Bible speaks of living God, living souls, people are living. So it's become just, theism would be living. And you say, well, how does this just keep going? Well, you remember we have the assertion in Reformed theology of regeneration precedes faith, and yet you notice faith is not defined as an action that is by an unregenerate person to believe, punctular, simple form of action, or is it referring to the one who is believing, who's the one who has been fathered out from God? So when that assertion is made, we notice, so according to Reformed theology, regeneration and what we'll do is make this, this will work. So it precedes, but now they have this qualifier, but not temporally. There we go. And then we have this act, believe, temporally. Then we have regeneration. And then we have believing. So those that deny regeneration precedes faith are correct temporally, but the leader of this notion of regeneration precedes faith, but not temporally, is the late R.C. Sproul. So again, we have believe and believing, and here is regeneration. We can also rewrite that as this. We have believe. We have this conduit, and it's through gospel, the gospel. And then on this side is the one who is believing. And this is a verbal substantive. A gerundive noun. There. And this is a finite verb. It's also aorist. Those of you that use that, we have a Koine project class at the church where I pastor, and I'll have this video on that, iamkoine.org or iamkoine, which is the Landmark Baptist YouTube channel. But this will be on the Global Lamp University, because this is from the social science view, and thus far we really don't see people seeking an adherence over a consensus. So for in-group, out-group dynamics, which we'll talk about that, we're starting to notice why things that can be demonstrated to not reflect the text will still carry on to the next generation, handed over and continue to go viral, if you will, in today's vernacular. And of course, we have number 5, the novel contention between, in the last 40 years, I suppose, the young and old earthism. Yeah, let's just call it that, earthism. Everybody needs a good ism in our social science an observation of the social dynamics. But few notice the ratio. I'll put links to that. Few will define this as chronological, this as geological, and even fewer will notice the chiasmus inversion of 1 day to 1,000 years, and 1,000 years to 1 day. So we noticed that from the social science perspective, for example, from the view that I'm quite captivated by and I'm looking to see, and my entire research was premised upon the question, is it because we're unwilling or unable to see from a point of view from where contradiction no longer appears? And seems to be the highest expression and the highest demonstration of a view from where no contradiction appears, with the ultimate implication, seems to be in the Trinity. Now, I've mentioned before there's a great scholar out there, Dr. James R. White. He wrote a book about the Trinity, the Forgotten Trinity. He may have other volumes. He now has another book out, Sovereignty of God. His works are excellent when he speaks in terms of those ultimate expressions in the text, such as the Trinity and God's sovereignty. But when we come to these types of things, this one here really begs the question. It's similar to if someone can, let's say, excel in differential equations or calculus, and then somehow try to convince us or convince someone else that they can't do arithmetic, multiplication, addition, division, things like that, because it's really about degree of difficulty. Now, in the social dynamic of religion, we seem to be more inclined to make a triage, or let's prioritize our constructs, our traditions, our doctrines, if you will. But really that it's striking, because within religion there's a high level of scholarship and academia as well. So universities, seminaries, just unsurpassed in scholarship as far as critical thinking, evaluating ancient text historically, which are quite voluminous. So what I'm focusing on now is what I was taught to focus on by my hermeneutics professor, for example, Dr. John Penn, was, when we have this ability to view this here, it should show that it's less difficult to do this. For example, so let's say there's A, the ratio, B, the distinction, defined terms, C, the chiasmus inversion, so that we notice decay rates, A, B, C, D, decay rates. We notice after the flood, for example, so after the flood, well, I should have said not only after the flood, but reference Psalm 90, where, for example, God removed 90% of lifespan from 100% of humanity. And that was accomplished. Now for us, we have a 10 times accelerated decay rate today. So we know that numerous people born into this world don't live until 1 year old, and most people don't live until 100 years old, and yet they were had a 1,000-year lifespan prior to God's judgment and, of course, the flood. And when he removed that. So that's really quite a fascinating thing to notice, that this young old, and again, questions that I'll be asking that we can be evaluating collectively at the Global Lamp University, as the threshold of entry, for example, is very low when you just pick a formed category. And for example, if you don't define it, let's say just you don't define young as chronological, old as geological, you don't look for literary devices that are common in the text. That's a term also. I'll go ahead and just include that. You can look this up later, but we'll talk about it. But it seems that our biases are why perhaps, once we have what we need to meet our society, and when I say society, I mean our group, large or small, and then the in group is satisfied with whatever part or portion. For example, if you're from a monotheistic tradition, let's say Islamic or Judaic, and you are an antagonist to polytheistic, or you're a polytheistic group and you're antagonistic to monotheistic, well, both of these converge against the Trinity, because this is from a point of view from where no contradiction appears. So that'll be our ultimate demonstrate, our thesis that demonstrates that it is very much unnecessary to have contradictions of much less degree of difficulty than the development of the Trinity. So that's enough, and just enjoy this. This is the first video uploaded at Global Lamp University, and then I'll make a playlist at iamcornet.org, the YouTube channel, and you all can begin evaluating. Let's get feedback from a group, a social science perspective, and what is it about our identity? Some have so identified, let's say, donned an identity that's monotheistic or polytheistic. They're probably born in it. It's their culture. It's their life. They couldn't see themselves distinguished from that. So we need to know that there are strong factors in which we find ourselves habituated and acculturated. So have a good day, and be thinking about this, Global Lamp University, and we'll focus, as Dr. Penn, well-trained, and he sent me on a large journey of research, and I have volumes of that. So we'll go ahead and just place that on this Global Lamp University YouTube channel, and then make a playlist on another channel. So you have a good day.